It was just after 7 p.m. when Robert Jackson pulled into the empty parking lot of Prosperity Community Bank's newest branch. The evening sun cast long shadows across the asphalt as he grabbed his leather portfolio from the passenger seat. Robert had spent the entire day at a neighborhood financial literacy workshop, and his casual navy polo shirt and khaki pants were a far cry from his usual tailored suits. But that was exactly how he wanted it, connecting with people without the barriers that formal attire sometimes created. As founder and owner of Prosperity Community Bank, Robert had built his business from nothing into a network of branches serving neighborhoods that larger banks had abandoned. At 52, with silver sprinkled through his close-cropped hair, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had overcome countless obstacles to achieve his dreams. The side entrance clicked open when Robert used his master key. He preferred visiting branches after hours. It gave him a chance to see how things really operated without the performance that sometimes came with announced visits. The lights inside were dimmed, but not completely off. Someone was still working late. Robert breathed in the familiar smell of new carpet and fresh paint that still lingered weeks after the grand opening. This branch represented everything he had worked for, located in a historically black neighborhood where residents previously had to travel miles just to cash a check. The modern interior with local artwork on the walls was designed to make people feel welcome, respected. He walked through the main lobby, his footsteps echoing slightly against the polished floor. The security cameras quietly tracked his movement, their tiny red lights blinking in the semi-darkness. Robert made mental notes about the layout. Perhaps they should move the customer service desk closer to the entrance, make it more approachable. In the back offices, a light spilled out from under one door. Probably Diane from lending, Robert thought, always staying late to help clients with paperwork. He made his way toward the vault area, wanting to check if the new security system was properly installed. The contractors had promised it would be finished today. Robert didn't notice the woman who had peeked out from the lit office. He didn't see how her eyes widened at the sight of him. He didn't hear her frantically whisper into her phone, "Yes, someone has broken in. He's near the vault right now. Please hurry." He didn't know that Teresa Ford, the recently hired branch manager who had never met him in person, was staring at his back with growing panic. Teresa had only seen photos of the bank's founder in formal business settings, a distinguished man in expensive suits speaking at charity galas or cutting ribbons at branch openings. The casually dressed black man examining their security systems did not match the mental image she had formed. Robert pulled out his phone to take pictures of the new keypad installation when he heard a voice from behind. He turned, ready to introduce himself with the warm smile that had become his trademark in banking circles. But the words died on his lips when he saw the woman's expression, a mixture of fear and suspicion that he had encountered too many times before in his life. Something was very wrong. Through the large windows facing the street, red and blue lights suddenly painted the bank's interior in urgent, pulsing colors. Robert's stomach dropped as he realized what was happening. 20 years of building one of the most successful black-owned banking institutions in the state, and here he was, about to be confronted as an intruder in his own building. Outside, car doors slammed. Heavy footsteps approached. Robert took a deep breath and placed his portfolio and phone slowly on the nearest desk, preparing for what was coming next. The bank's side door burst open as two police officers rushed in, flashlights cutting through the dim interior. Robert stood perfectly still, his hands now visible at his sides. He'd been in situations like this before, not as the owner of a bank, but as a black man in the wrong place at the wrong time, at least in someone else's eyes. "Don't move. Keep your hands where we can see them," shouted the taller officer, his right hand hovering near his holster. The second officer flanked to the left, creating a practiced formation. Their faces were tense, ready for anything. "My name is Robert Jackson," he said, his voice steady despite the hammering in his chest. "I own this bank. My ID is in my back pocket, and there are photos of me in the main lobby." Teresa emerged from her office, clutching her cell phone like a lifeline. Her face had gone pale, but there was still certainty in her eyes, the kind that comes from believing you've caught someone red-handed. "He was examining the vault," she said to the officers. "I've never seen him before. He doesn't look like any of our staff." The officers didn't take their eyes off Robert. The shorter one spoke into his radio, requesting backup while his partner stepped closer, flashlight beam directly in Robert's face. "Ma'am, step back into your office for safety," the officer instructed Teresa. "Sir, I need you to slowly place your hands behind your head and interlock your fingers." Robert complied, moving with deliberate slowness. 20 years of building respect in the finance world, creating opportunities in neighborhoods abandoned by big banks, and here he was, being treated like a criminal in the building that bore his signature on every document. "Officer, there's a simple way to clear this up." Robert kept his tone professional, the same voice he used in board meetings when tensions ran high. "Call William Chen, the regional director. His number is on the contact list by every employee's desk. Or you can check the photos in the lobby. There's one of me cutting the ribbon at this branch's opening 3 weeks ago." The taller officer glanced at Teresa. "Ma'am, is there a photo we can check?" Teresa hesitated. She'd only been working at this branch for 2 weeks, transferred from another bank entirely. She'd seen photographs in the company newsletter, but they'd always been of a distinguished man in formal business attire, not someone in casual clothes after hours. "Then there might be," she admitted, her certainty wavering for the first time. The second officer kept watch on Robert, while his partner followed Teresa to the lobby wall where staff photos hung in neat frames. The beam of his flashlight moved across the faces until it stopped on one particular picture. A professional photograph showed Robert Jackson in a suit, shaking hands with the mayor at the branch opening. The officer stared at the photo, then back at Robert, then at the photo again. Something shifted in his expression. "Stay where you are, sir," he said, but his tone had changed. He walked back to his partner and whispered something. Both looked uncertain now. "I'm going to reach for my phone very slowly," Robert said. "I can call William Chen myself. Or better yet, check my ID in my back pocket." Teresa stood frozen, her eyes darting between the photos on the wall and the man standing with his hands behind his head. The realization was dawning on her face, a horrible, sinking understanding that she had made a terrible mistake. The shorter officer approached cautiously. "I'll check your ID, sir. Please keep your hands where they are and tell me which pocket." "Back right pocket. Black wallet," Robert replied. As the officer carefully retrieved the wallet and flipped it open, Teresa's face crumpled. There it was, Robert Jackson, founder and CEO, Prosperity Community Bank, alongside a driver's license with the same face as the man standing before them. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," the officer said, his voice now professionally neutral. Robert lowered his hands slowly after receiving a nod from the officer. The tension in the room remained thick enough to cut with a knife. Outside, another police car pulled up, its lights still flashing through the windows. "A misunderstanding," Robert repeated, the words heavy with unspoken meaning. That's one way to put it. The third police car had barely parked when William Chen burst through the front door of the bank, his tie loosened and face flushed from rushing over. As the regional director of Prosperity Community Bank, he dropped everything the moment he received the call about a situation at the newest branch. William stopped dead in his tracks at the scene before him. Robert Jackson, the founder and owner of the entire banking chain, standing with his wallet in hand while officers hovered nearby. Teresa looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "Robert, what on earth is going on here?" William rushed forward, then remembered himself and nodded respectfully to the officers. "Officers, this is Robert Jackson. He owns this entire banking institution." The lead officer straightened up, clearly reassessing the situation. "We responded to a call about a possible break-in, sir. The situation is becoming clearer now." Robert took a slow, deep breath. His expression remained calm, but William, who had worked with him for over a decade, could see the tightness around his eyes. That look had appeared during the 2008 financial crisis when they nearly lost everything, and again when the city council had tried to block permits for this very branch. "William, I see you've met our newest branch manager," Robert said, gesturing toward Teresa without looking at her. His voice was measured, professional, the voice he used when addressing difficult board members. William glanced at Teresa, understanding immediately what had happened. His face fell. I'm so sorry, Robert. Ms. Ford transferred from Central Bank 2 weeks ago. The orientation packet with your photo and biography was supposed to be." "Let's discuss that later," Robert cut in gently. He turned to the officers, who were now looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Officers, I appreciate your prompt response to what you believed was a security threat. You were doing your job." The lead officer cleared his throat. "Mr. Jackson, we apologize for the confusion. We'll need to file a report about the incident, but clearly there's no crime here." The third officer, who had just entered, looked confused. "So, there's no break-in?" "None at all," Robert said firmly. "Just a misunderstanding between myself and an employee who hasn't met me in person before." Teresa finally found her voice, though it came out barely above a whisper. "I'm deeply sorry, Mr. Jackson. When I saw someone I didn't recognize examining the vault area after hours." Robert held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence, not rudely, but with the quiet authority of someone used to commanding rooms much larger than this bank lobby. "We'll discuss this tomorrow during business hours, Miss Ford. Tonight, I think we've all had enough excitement." The words were professional, but everyone present could feel the weight behind them. The officers began to file out, muttering apologies and completing their necessary paperwork. One lingered behind for a moment. "Mr. Jackson," he said quietly, "for what it's worth, I think you've handled this with remarkable composure. Not everyone would be so understanding." Robert nodded once, the smallest acknowledgement of what remained unsaid between them. Both men knew that situations like this could end very differently. As the final police car pulled away, its lights no longer painting the bank walls in red and blue, an uncomfortable silence descended. The three banking professionals stood in the lobby, the portraits of past and present leaderships staring down at them from the walls. William broke the silence first. "Robert, your car is still at the community center. Let me drive you home." Teresa clutched her purse, key card, and what remained of her professional dignity. "Should I? Would you prefer if I submitted my resignation tonight, Mr. Jackson?" For the first time that evening, Robert's carefully maintained expression cracked slightly. Something like sadness, or perhaps disappointment, flickered across his face. That would be the easy way out, wouldn't it? For both of us. He picked up his portfolio from where he had set it down earlier. "But I didn't build this bank by taking the easy way out of difficult situations, Miss Ford. 9 o'clock tomorrow, my office at headquarters. We have much to discuss about perception, assumptions, and the future of this institution." As Robert walked toward the exit with William, the security cameras silently recorded everything, just as they had captured the entire incident from beginning to end. By morning, those recordings would become much more important than any of them could have imagined. Teresa remained standing alone in the lobby long after they had gone, staring at the portrait of Robert Jackson on the wall. The man who had built a banking empire from nothing, who had created financial opportunities in neighborhoods other banks wouldn't touch, and whom she had almost had arrested in his own building. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Robert's corner office at Prosperity Community Bank headquarters. He sat quietly, reviewing the security footage from the previous night for the third time. Each viewing made his stomach tighten a little more. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, closing the video player on his computer. William entered, followed by Teresa. Her eyes were rimmed with red, her usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. She'd clearly spent a sleepless night wrestling with what had happened. "Please, sit down," Robert gestured to the chairs across from his desk. Teresa perched on the edge of her seat like someone preparing to receive bad news. William sat beside her, his expression grave. "Before we begin," Robert said, folding his hands on his desk, "I want to clarify something. This meeting isn't about punishment. It's about understanding." Teresa blinked in surprise. "Sir, I prepared my resignation letter." She placed a sealed envelope on his desk with trembling fingers. Robert made no move to take it. Instead, he turned his computer screen so both could see it. "I'd like us to watch something together first." He played the security footage from the previous night. The silent video showed the entire incident from multiple angles: Robert entering the bank, examining the new security system, Teresa's panicked call, the police arrival, the confrontation. When it ended, the office fell into heavy silence. "Do you know why I founded Prosperity Community Bank, Miss Ford?" Robert finally asked. Teresa shook her head slightly. 15 years ago, I was a successful investment banker. I had the suits, the car, all the trappings of success." He gestured around his well-appointed office. One day, I went to my local bank branch to discuss a business loan. I was dressed casually, much like yesterday. The manager wouldn't even speak with me. Called security to escort me out. He leaned forward. When I returned the next day in a suit, suddenly I was worthy of respect. That's when I realized how broken the system was. Not just for me, but for entire communities who were judged before they even spoke. William nodded solemnly, having heard this story many times before. I built this bank to serve people who felt unwelcome elsewhere. People judged by their appearance rather than their character. Robert's voice remained steady, but his eyes held Teresa's gaze firmly. The irony that this happened to me in my own bank is not lost on me. Teresa's face crumpled. Mr. Jackson, I'm truly sorry. I have no excuse. I made a terrible assumption. Yes, you did, Robert agreed simply. But the more important question is, what will you learn from it? Before Teresa could answer, Robert's phone buzzed. His assistant's worried voice came through the speaker. Sir, there's something you need to see immediately. The security footage from last night. It's online. Robert frowned. What do you mean, online? Someone leaked it. It's all over social media, already has thousands of shares. Reporters are calling. They want a statement. The three bankers exchanged alarmed looks. Robert quickly pulled up a news site on his computer. Sure enough, there it was, a slightly edited version of the security footage showing Robert being confronted by police in his own bank. The headline read, Banking While Black, found a mistaken for intruder in his own institution. This changes things, William muttered, pulling out his phone which had begun buzzing incessantly. Teresa looked as though she might faint. Everyone will know it was me. My career was over. Robert stared at the screen, watching his private humiliation become public spectacle. For a moment, his carefully maintained composure slipped, revealing the deep hurt beneath. Then, just as quickly, the professional mask returned. Actually, he said slowly, this might be exactly what we needed. Both William and Teresa looked at him in confusion. Sir? William questioned. Robert stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city he'd served for decades. What happened last night wasn't just about me and Ms. Ford. It happens every day, in every city, to people who don't have the protection of my position or resources. He turned back to face them. Now we have a choice. We can hide from this, issue standard apologies, and hope it blows over. Or we can use it to start an honest conversation, one that might actually change something. Teresa looked up, confusion mixing with the shame on her face. You're not firing me. Would firing you solve the real problem? Robert asked simply. Would it help our customers who face the same assumptions daily? Would it prevent this from happening again somewhere else, to someone else? He walked back to his desk and finally picked up Teresa's resignation letter. He held it for a moment, then handed it back to her unopened. I have a different proposal, he said, one that's much harder than walking away, but potentially much more valuable. For all of us. As Robert outlined his unexpected plan, none of them noticed the crowd of reporters gathering outside the bank headquarters, cameras ready, hungry for a story that was quickly becoming national news. By noon, the story had exploded. Robert's phone hadn't stopped ringing, calls from other bank owners, community leaders, old friends, and dozens of reporters. The security footage played on loop on local news stations, with national networks picking it up by the afternoon. Social media buzzed with outrage, support, and everything in between. Outside Prosperity Community Bank's headquarters, protesters had gathered with hastily made signs. Banking while black shouldn't be a crime, read one. Justice for Robert Jackson, declared another. Inside his office, Robert sat with his crisis management team. Patricia, his longtime public relations director, paced the floor. We need to issue a statement immediately, she insisted. The longer we wait, the worse this gets. People are demanding you fire her, sue the police department, everything under the sun. Robert shook his head. We're not rushing this. A quick statement won't fix what happened. The bank's reputation, Patricia began, is built on trust and community, Robert finished firmly. Not on pretty words that change nothing. William, who had been fielding calls from other branch managers all morning, looked up from his phone. The staff are confused. They need direction, and Teresa is completely devastated. She's hiding in the break room because she can't face anyone. Robert nodded thoughtfully. He stood up and walked to the window, watching the growing crowd below. Among the protesters, he spotted familiar faces, bank customers, community members, people whose mortgage applications he personally approved when other banks had turned them away. "Gather all the staff," he said suddenly. "Everyone, all branches. Video conference for those who can't be here physically. 1 hour from now." Patricia looked alarmed. "What are you planning to say?" "The truth," Robert said simply. And then something more important. An hour later, the main conference room was packed with employees. Branch managers from across the city joined via video. At the back of the room, Teresa stood with her head down, looking as if she wanted to disappear. The room hummed with tension and whispered conversations. Robert entered quietly, and the room fell silent immediately. He carried no notes, no prepared statement. He simply stood at the front and looked at the faces of the people who made his banking vision possible. "By now, you've all seen the video," he began, his voice steady. "Last night, I was treated like a criminal in my own bank. It hurt. It angered me. It reminded me of every slight, every suspicious glance, every time I've been followed in a store or stopped for no reason." The room was completely still. "What happened to me is not unique. It happens every day to people who look like me. The only difference is that I own the building it happened in." He paused, letting that sink in. "And I have the power to do something about it." He walked slowly around the front of the room, making eye contact with as many employees as possible. "I could fire Ms. Ford. I could sue. I could hold a press conference and express my outrage. And tomorrow, the exact same thing would happen to someone else, somewhere else." He stopped directly in front of Teresa, who finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "All we could learn from this, all of us, including me." Robert turned back to address the whole room. "Starting today, Prosperity Community Bank is launching a new initiative. We're calling it Banking on Trust. Every employee, from janitors to executives, will participate in a comprehensive training program about unconscious bias. Not just one day of sensitivity training, but ongoing education and community engagement." Murmurs spread through the room as people glanced at each other. "Ms. Ford will help develop this program," Robert continued, causing more surprised whispers. "Her perspective is valuable precisely because of what happened. And I'll be sharing my experiences too, not just from last night, but from decades in an industry that wasn't built for people who look like me." Teresa's shock was visible. "Mr. Jackson, I don't deserve." "This isn't about what any of us deserve," Robert said gently. "It's about creating the change we need to see." He turned back to the room at large. "The reporters outside want a statement. They want drama and conflict. Instead, we're going to show them something much more powerful, real, meaningful action." Patricia raised her hand. "The press is demanding an interview. What should I tell them?" Robert smiled for the first time that day. "Tell them I'll do one interview, but I won't be doing it alone." He glanced at Teresa. "If she's willing, we'll do it together. Show them what accountability and growth actually look like." As the meeting continued, nobody noticed the security guard at the back of the room, quietly recording everything on his phone. By evening, this video too would find its way online, not as a scandal, but as something much rarer. A glimpse of what reconciliation might actually look like. The studio lights felt uncomfortably warm as Robert and Teresa sat side by side on the interview set. It had been 3 weeks since the incident, and this was their first public appearance together. The national morning show had promoted the interview heavily. Banking While Black, a conversation on bias and reconciliation. Behind the cameras, producers whispered to each other. They had expected tension, perhaps even hostility, good for ratings. Instead, Robert and Teresa had arrived together, speaking quietly as they got their microphones attached. "Just remember, speak from the heart," Robert told Teresa as the makeup artist made final touches. "This isn't about performing, it's about being honest." Teresa nodded, her hands fidgeting with her note card of talking points. She'd lost weight in the past weeks, the stress evident on her face despite the makeup. The host, Vanessa Powell, a veteran journalist known for hard-hitting interviews, settled into her chair across from them. "We'll live in 5, 4, 3. The producer counted down silently with fingers for the final 2 seconds. "Good morning, America. Today we're joined by Robert Jackson, founder and owner of Prosperity Community Bank, and Teresa Ford, the branch manager who called police on him when she mistook him for an intruder in his own bank. The incident, captured on security cameras, has sparked a nationwide conversation about racial profiling in professional settings. Vanessa turned to her guests. "Thank you both for being here today." "Thank you for having us," Robert replied calmly. Vanessa didn't waste time. "Mr. Jackson, many people expected you to fire Ms. Ford immediately. Instead, you've made her part of your response to this incident. Why?" Robert leaned slightly forward. Firing Teresa would have been easy. It would have made headlines for a day. But then what? Another person would make the same mistake somewhere else tomorrow, and nothing would change. "Ms. Ford," Vanessa turned sharply, "you've become the face of racial profiling in America. How does that feel?" Teresa took a deep breath. "Horrible. Embarrassing. Deserved." Her voice trembled slightly. "I spent weeks replaying that night, asking myself why I immediately assumed he didn't belong there. I had never met Mr. Jackson in person, but his photo was right there on the wall." She paused. "I've had to face some uncomfortable truths about myself." "Such as?" Vanessa pressed. "That despite considering myself a good person who doesn't judge others, I made a split-second judgment based solely on appearance. That's the definition of prejudice." Teresa's honesty seemed to surprise even the veteran host. Robert jumped in. "What's remarkable isn't that Teresa made this mistake. What's remarkable is her willingness to acknowledge it publicly and work to change. That's far harder than simply being fired and disappearing from the conversation." The interview continued, with Robert explaining the new Banking on Trust initiative. As he described the comprehensive training program already underway at all branches, viewers could see his passion for creating lasting change. "We're partnering with community organizations to create workshops open to other businesses as well," he explained. "This isn't just about banks. It's about all the spaces where people are judged by appearance rather than character." Teresa added, "The training helped me understand that these aren't just abstract concepts. These are real experiences that affect real people every day." Mr. Jackson shared stories with us about times he was followed in stores or questioned in hotels, even as a successful businessman. Vanessa leaned forward. "Some critics said this is just a publicity stunt to protect the bank's image. How do you respond?" For the first time, a flash of anger crossed Robert's face, quickly controlled. "Those critics have never experienced what it's like to be seen as a threat simply for existing in certain spaces. This isn't about publicity. It's about creating environments where everyone is treated with dignity." As the interview concluded, Vanessa asked the question viewers had been waiting for. "Ms. Ford, do you still believe you should have been fired?" Teresa looked directly at the camera. "What I did was wrong. But firing me wouldn't undo that wrong. Working to make sure it doesn't happen to others, that feels like actual justice. It's certainly harder than just losing my job and moving on." Robert nodded. "Sometimes the hardest path is the most necessary one." Later that afternoon, as they walked through the main branch where the incident had occurred, customers stopped to shake Robert's hand. Several thanked Teresa for her honesty during the interview. "I didn't expect that," she admitted quietly as they headed toward the conference room for their next meeting. "I expected more anger." Robert paused, watching a young black couple speaking with a loan officer across the lobby. "People respond to authenticity. We're not pretending this was easy or that everything is fixed. We're just showing that growth is possible." Inside the conference room, 20 bank managers from other institutions waited. These weren't Prosperity employees. They were competitors who had reached out after seeing the morning interview, wanting to implement similar training at their branches. "Ready?" Robert asked Teresa as they reached the door. She straightened her shoulders, ready to turn a mistake into a movement. 6 months had passed since that fateful night at Prosperity Community Bank. The crisp autumn morning found Robert standing at the podium in the grand ballroom of the National Banking Association's annual conference. 500 banking executives from across the country watched as he prepared to deliver the keynote address. Robert adjusted his microphone and looked out at the sea of faces. In the front row sat Teresa, now serving as the Director of Community Relations at Prosperity. Beside her was William, beaming with pride at how far they had come. 6 months ago, Robert began, I was almost arrested in my own bank. A ripple of knowing murmurs spread through the crowd. By now, most people in banking circles knew the story. Today, I want to tell you what happened after the cameras stopped rolling and the news cycle moved on. He clicked a button, and behind him appeared a photograph of the newest Prosperity branch opening. The ribbon cutting showed Robert and Teresa flanked by community members of all backgrounds. What began as a painful incident became the catalyst for the most significant growth in our bank's history, Robert continued. Not just financial growth, though our new accounts have increased by 30%. He smiled. Turns out, people appreciate doing business with a bank that faces its mistakes head-on. The slides changed to show workshop sessions, community meetings, and training programs. The Banking on Trust initiative has now been implemented in 67 banks across 12 states. Over 4,000 banking professionals have completed the training program that Teresa helped design. He gestured toward her with respect. And most importantly, we've heard from countless customers about how differently they feel when they walk through our doors. Robert clicked to the next slide, which showed a handwritten letter. This note came from a young man who had been turned down for loans at 3 different banks. He wrote, "For the first time, I felt like someone was actually seeing me, not just my skin color or my zip code. That feeling is worth more than the loan itself." Robert paused, letting the words sink in. The truth is, what happened that night could have happened anywhere. It still happens every day. The only difference is that we decided to do something about it. He stepped away from the podium and walked to the edge of the stage, speaking now without notes. I've been asked dozens of times if I forgave Teresa for what happened. That's the wrong question. This was never about individual forgiveness. It was about recognizing a systemic problem and having the courage to address it. In the audience, several people shifted uncomfortably. We in the banking industry talk a lot about trust. It's in our mottos, our advertising, our mission statements. But trust isn't built on words, it's built on actions. On what happens when things go wrong. On who gets the benefit of the doubt and who doesn't. Robert spoke directly to the banking leaders before him. Some of you invited us to bring our training program to your institutions, and I thank you for that. Others thought we were overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. His voice remained kind but firm. I invite you to ask yourselves, how many misunderstandings add up to a pattern? How many patterns add up to a broken system? Teresa stood up from her seat and joined Robert on stage as they had planned. The audience seemed surprised by this unscheduled moment. Ms. Ford has something to share with you, Robert said, stepping aside. Teresa took a deep breath. When I called the police on Mr. Jackson that night, I didn't think of myself as prejudiced. I thought I was doing my job. Her voice carried clearly through the ballroom. What I've learned since then is that good intentions aren't enough. Not when the consequences of our unconscious biases can be so severe. She gestured to Robert. He could have been hurt or worse that night. Instead, he turned it into an opportunity for education, not just for me, but for all of us. Together, they unveiled the announcement they had come to make, a new nonprofit organization funded by Prosperity Community Bank, dedicated to bringing bias awareness training to businesses of all kinds. Because this doesn't just happen in banks, Robert explained. It happens in stores, in hotels, in office buildings, anywhere people make split-second judgments based on appearance. As the presentation concluded and the room filled with applause, a young banking intern approached Robert with tears in her eyes. My father experienced something similar last year, she told him quietly. But there was no camera, no viral video, no happy ending. Thank you for doing this. Later that evening, as Robert and Teresa shared a quiet moment on the hotel balcony overlooking the city lights, he asked the question that had been on his mind. Looking back, would you change anything about how we handled it? Teresa considered this carefully. I would have preferred not to make the mistake in the first place, she said with a small smile. But the outcome? No, I wouldn't change that. Below them, the city continued its evening rhythm, millions of lives intersecting in ways both seen and unseen. Tomorrow, they would return to the bank where it all began, continuing the work of building trust, one interaction, one acknowledgement, one changed mind at a time.